Today you're here to talk about the post-16 options, and we've got two people with us from Windsor Maidenhead. That's Joanna and David, and they're going to introduce themselves in a moment. I'm part of PaCiP, and so is Way. Way's just turned the camera off, but Way is the coordinator for PaCiP. And then we've got Christine Doyle here as well. Hi, Christine. Thank you for joining. And for those that don't know, Christine, I think everyone knows Christine. This is what I'm beginning to realise now. But Christine is part of the Windsor Maidenhead IAS, which is quite a long title. But it's, Christine, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, just that we're commonly known as IAS. So yeah, I know a few of the names and faces, but there are some I don't, so they don't necessarily know me. I think Lisa's also tapping in, Lisa Abraham. So Lisa's an advisor as well with IAS.
Thank you both for joining. So IAS are extremely helpful for when you need support and help, and I'm sure they might be able to answer the questions if they come through. So I think we might make a start because I know time runs away with us. So I'm going to pass over to Joanna and David, who are going to introduce themselves.
Hi, sorry, just unmute myself. So good morning, everyone. My name is Joanna Saffa. I am the post-16 manager, or the preparing for adulthood manager for Windsor and Maidenhead CENTI. David.
Hi, and I'm David Griffiths. So I manage the SEN service altogether. So we effectively have two teams, which is the PFA team, which Joanna manages, and then we have a 0 to 16 team as well.
Okay, so I'm happy to, I'm going to start sharing my screen now. So I've got a presentation to kind of go through to kind of talk about the post-16 options. Give me 1 second.
So we will be sending this, if I could ask that everybody uses the mute button whilst the presentations are taking place. And if you wanted to ask questions, could we use the chat function? It's just an easier way. And if I feel it's appropriate to ask that question, I can stop Joanna at that moment, or we'll do questions at the end. So, and if there's any comments you'd like to make, please feel free to add a comment to the chat as well, because I share the comments with both Joanna and David. Okay, right, so I'll let you go. I'll put myself on mute.
Lovely. So thank you very much. So I'll be starting the presentation. So we're here to discuss post-16 options. So just a bit of kind of contents wise, I'll be briefly kind of touching upon routes into employment. So that's going to be including supported internships, apprenticeships, etc. Then we're going to talk about FE college, sixth form college, or school sixth form, pardon me, or sixth form college. What's the difference? Then we'll talk about FE colleges, our local provider, and other colleges that we work with. And then we'll kind of touch upon sort of the application process in that as well. And then finally, we'll just touch upon annual reviews and the preparing for adulthood outcomes. What are the PFA outcomes and how are they incorporated into our EHCPs? Right, so routes into employment. So there are three main routes of employment that you're likely to be aware of. So we've got apprenticeships, supported internships, and traineeships. I've got a separate slide for all of them, so I'm going to move on. But just to make you aware, there is a kind of a new route into work or a new work-based learning program called Technical Levels, T-Levels, that were introduced in September 2020. And I've got a slide on that, so I'll kind of go into a little bit more depth. So it's usually there are three, but there's this new one as well. So apprenticeships. Most people are aware of this, young people are aware of it. It's a work-based learning program. The young person is working. We've got different levels of apprenticeships, which there's like a little diagram there for you. So intermediate is level 2 or equivalent to GCSE, advanced level 3 equivalent to an A level. What we have, so to kind of say, so it's combining training with a job and study. Depending on the level, it will take between 1 to 5 years to complete. And then there's kind of little kind of rundown of what the apprentices will do. So they'll work alongside experienced staff, they'll get job specific skills, they'll earn a wage, and they'll get study to study time for the role if they need it. So if they haven't passed the kind of English and maths element of it, they can study towards that as well. A lot of reading here, a lot of for you all. So just to kind of clarify, you will get a copy of this so you can have a read of it later. So what are the requirements of an apprenticeship? You need to be 16 or over by the end of the summer holidays. So if we're looking for September 21 entry, for example, a young person needs to be 16. You need to be living in England, tongue twister, sorry, and then you need to not be in full-time education. An apprenticeship is considered a full-time, so you can't be doing like a college course alongside it. So a common question we get asked, do you need an EHCP to access an apprenticeship? No. Apprenticeships are open to anyone, as long as the entry requirements that I just spoke about are met. But that's not to say we would necessarily close a plan. If the plan does remain open, training providers and employers can access additional funding to support the young person if needed. So in terms of so just to kind of give you an idea of the kind of consultation process with this, if a young person tells us they would like to complete an apprenticeship, they would obviously need to apply for it. It is a competitive process. At the end of the day, it is a job. So what we would do is encourage the young person to apply for it. And there might be some entry requirements for it depending on the grading. So the level, so obviously you wouldn't, if you just, for example, kind of go back to study a higher degree level, obviously there'd need to be GCSEs, A levels that need to have been completed in order to access that. So going on to what support is available. So there's an expectation that the employer will make reasonable adjustments in order to meet the needs of the young person with or without an EHCP, which is why an EHCP is not necessarily needed to access an apprenticeship. And then if a workplace, so if additional workplace support is required, the employer can apply for access to work funding. Which could look, going into my notes because I don't remember it off the top of my head. So, so funding can be used for aids, equipment and adaptations in the workplace, travel to and from work, support workers, interpreters, and then kind of other bits and pieces. They have a criteria. You can Google access to work funding. And then the training provider as well. So that's like if you're accessing learning alongside the work element of it, can also apply for, can also claim for learning support funds from the ESFA. So the ESFA is the Education Skills and Funding Agency. That's how colleges are funded. We make an application for funding. Colleges make applications for funding for young people. So it's the kind of the post-16 learner route to get funding. What I wanted to add on that as well, just quickly going back to this one, sorry for flipping back and forth. So just a kind of question, another question that we do get asked, can an EHCP stay open on all levels? The answer is no. So intermediate and advanced, if the young person's got an EHCP and the employer wants to draw down the additional funding to support the young person, we would keep the plan open. That's absolutely fine. Higher and degree, we wouldn't support. That's in line with the Code of Practice, which states that once a young person moves into higher education, so this is university, the plan would close and then funding would, support would be accessed via a different route. So the plan would close. The next programme I'll talk about is supported internships. So supported internships, study programme that helps young people aged 16 to 24 to get a job. So an SI will last at least 6 months, but obviously we work in academic years, so that is usually spread across an academic year. So the expectation would be once this SI is completed, a plan will close because so the young person would develop kind of skills and experience in order to move into paid employment. So we're unlike an apprenticeship, you don't get paid in an SI. And what did I want to say? I lost my train of thought there. So you don't get paid, unfortunately, but you are, most of the SIs that we work with are linked to a college They ordinarily run between 3 to 4 days in the workplace, and then maybe 1 to 2 days, depending on the kind of breakdown in the education setting, building up on English and maths if the young person needs to build or pass it, and then CV skills, interview skills, applications for jobs. There are different models for supported internships. So it could be that it's based within one provider, so what within one employer. So for example, if you're based within a hospital, for example, you might be kind of in one setting, so i.e. the hospital, but be rotated within. So usually it's broken down into 3 rotations, termly rotations, so the young person can get a real feel for the job and develop the skills. So they would be rotated within the hospital, for example, or there are other employment models where they are kind of moved between different settings. So they do a term at, say, for example, one nursery and then move on to another nursery for the second term. Obviously, it needs to work in line with the employer or the provider. So the college or the partner, the supported internship partner, will be able to kind of clarify that if you apply for it. So what are the requirements for it? Previous work experience is desirable. So obviously a supported internship isn't a program where a young person is looking to find out what they want to do. They are ready for work. They need this extra additional support, after which the expectation is, like I said, to go into paid employment. So commitment, motivation, and enthusiasm to work. And then you do need an EHCP to access supported internships. Like I said, if you remember, I talked when I talked at you about supported about apprenticeships. They are funded in a particular way. Supported internships are funded through education, so through SEND, which is why the plan needs to remain open. What support's available? Already touched upon it. If the young person hasn't passed their maths or English, they will work towards that. And then also the benefit of the supported internships, or why it's a really good program of study, is that when the young person goes into the workplace, they will have a job coach who will then help them to develop, really kind of refine the skills and help them embed the skills that they're learning or the job that they're learning. That's not to say that they will have them one-to-one 24/7. That isn't the case. Sometimes a job coach needs to be shared around multiple pupils. There'll be a bank of time. Again, it depends on the on the supported internship. So the best people to ask would be either the college that arranges it or the provider that arranges it, if it's a partner like Ways Into Work, for example. Let me just go and see make sure I haven't missed anything. So just want to just quickly to go back on it. So supported internships, yes, you need to be work ready, because the expectation is that you'll have the skills and the work experience to then go into paid employment. However, it's not a prerequisite for a young person to have a job at the end of it. So whilst just to clarify that, it's, yes, they will develop the skills, but it depends on the host employer. If they're a really large company, if it's a hospital, for example, they may have a job available at the end of it for the young person, but that's not to say that they have to have a job for the young person. So if they can't offer a position, like I said, there will be support for the young person to apply for jobs outside of the supported internship model, to then hopefully go into paid employment afterwards. Excuse me. So the next one, so this is the last one of the 3 most common ones. So traineeships are for young people who want to work but need extra help and support. They offer the training, so they offer training and work experience to give them skills and confidence to get a job or apprenticeship, alongside support to improve maths and English. Typically, they last 6 weeks to 6 months. It really does depend on the traineeship itself. There is one that I'm aware of that's actually over the course of a year. So that's not to say that the young person will potentially be ready to sit an exam or completing an exam paper. It's just developing those literacy and numeracy skills if they want to do it, or if they need to do it, sorry. So what are the requirements? You need to be aged between 16 and 24. You need to be qualified below level 3, so that's below A level. And then you need to have limited work experience. And then again, Do you need to have an EHCP to access it? No, but that's not to say that obviously we would look to close a plan. We would obviously need to discuss what the next steps would be. So if it's part of a route into an apprenticeship or a supported internship or back, into a college or, into work, we would have that discussion. The SEN team would have that discussion with the young person. Okay, so T-levels. So T-levels, like I said, were introduced in September 2020. So they follow GCSEs and are equivalent to 3 A-levels. So it's a 2-year course, and it's been developed in collaboration with employers and businesses. So the content is specific to the needs of the industry and prepares the young person for work, further training, or study. Because again, we kind of monitor that. So the course is made up of that, of kind of the list there. So you've got a technical qualification for the industry area. Then you've got an industry placement with the employer for a minimum of 315 hours. That might be, just to clarify, it might not necessarily be a specific like 315 hours in a row. It could be broken down into different placements. Again, it depends on the college that this is linked to and the provider that they're working with. And then of course a minimum standard of English and maths if the students haven't achieved them. So what are the requirements? There might be a set of minimum GCSE grades required to access the specific T levels. So just to give you an example of some that were launched in September 2020, we have design, surveying and planning for construction, digital production, design and development, education and childcare. In September 21, there are a number of new kind of industry T-levels, industry-linked T-levels being introduced, including digital business service, healthcare science, on-site construction, and then digital support and services. And then there's still, over the course of September 22 and September 23, there will be even more launched. All of this, there are links at the end of this presentation, and I put a link to the T-level. I think I put a link to the T-level government website that you can get that information from, so you can see a full list there. Do you need to have an EHCP to access T-levels? No, you don't. You don't, but again, as I've said previously, if a young person does have an EHCP, we would obviously be sending a consultation to the college. These are linked to colleges. The main difference with this, whilst there is work-based learning with this is about 20% say work-based, 80% classroom. The others, apprenticeship, is going to be 99.9% work-based, supported internship, 80-ish%, and this is 20% because it's the young person will be working towards the kind of the technical qualifications. Rightio. I was going to say, Jo, are there any questions in case there are some?
Yeah, because you're going to move on to another subject now, aren't you?
Yeah, so I wanted to stop now just to double check.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we do have some questions. So
sure.
First question around supported internships and apprenticeships is, can transport be applied for if your young person is going to do one of these? Can they apply for transport?
Do you want me to go first, or?
Yes, I was going to say, so yeah, so David, I think you can kind of elaborate.
I mean, I know some of you may be aware the sort of the legal requirement to provide transport post-16 is fairly limited. So for any post-16 young person, effectively you need to be attending your nearest appropriate provision. I mean, obviously, if we decided that that's the place a young person should be going, and that they probably are the nearest provision, unless the young person's turned down something closer. But they also need to have SEN or a disability that means they couldn't reasonably be expected to make their own way to college, and they need to be from a low income family. So there's quite a lot of kind of hoops to jump through there. So basically, to qualify for transport assistance, you'd have to be from a low income family, and to qualify for actually a taxi or whatever actually taking you there, it'd have to be clear that really was the only way you'd be able to get to the provision, and it would need to be the nearest provision that's providing the right course, as it were. So to put a short answer, you can apply, but it's quite limited circumstances.
So can I just ask a question on top of that? when the young person reaches 18, then it's in their own right. So their own, it doesn't matter about the family's income then, it's on the young person itself. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm slightly, can I get back to you on post-19? Because I was reading about it earlier and I haven't quite got it wedged in my brain. But yes, it's a bit more complicated again. So I'll get back to you on that one, Jo. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, no problem. So a couple of questions come in about sort of real life examples of where in the local area, actually, you know, companies that are currently offering supported internships and apprenticeships. And just on the back of that, what are the, so there's a few questions. What are the reasonable adjustments that companies offer? And have you got any sort of data to say how many sport internship apprenticeships have turned into real jobs?
Oh, a lot of questions.
Sorry,
So no, it's fine. So let me kind of backward chain there. So data, there are national statistics around supported internships. From memory, I think it's around 66% go into paid employment, but I can't tell you whether that's with that employer that they did their supported internship at, or whether that is a national figure that they go into it from the supported internship. But it's high. It's a really good program of study. As you know, I'm talking in my field in terms of kind of work-based learning. I'm for any work-based kind of work-based learning program, just because, you know, it's a common kind of theme or not problem, but, you know, query that we get from families and from young people. So I'm all for it. So I can't give you the exact number. I'd need to look into it if I'm honest, but if memory serves, it's around 66% apprenticeships. I don't know. Apprenticeships are different because they are in the job that the young person would be doing. So I would presume if a young person qualifies and gets onto the apprenticeship, that they are being job carved, that is a job carved role for them to then continue afterwards. Because obviously if they're kind of, the employer is investing in them over a period of 1 to 5 years, it wouldn't make sense if they then said, okay, see you later. You know, it's the view of an apprenticeship is to then move into that field specifically again, but I'd need to check the statistics if I'm honest with that. Reasonable adjustments, I can't give you a lot of real life examples. The expectation would be, like I said, if there was if the young person needs an area to potentially take some time, if they're overloaded or they just need to kind of take a 5-minute break, the adjustments that we would expect settings to be able to put in place, not necessarily like kind of, so just those kind of things. And like I said, the access to work funding if there's more needed. So aids, equipment, adaptations to the workplace, the employer can apply for access to work funding. Access to work funding can also support to and travel from work, but it needs to be applied for in advance. So obviously if a young person does get onto an apprenticeship and says, I need help with transport, they really need to have that conversation with their employer as soon as possible so that they can request an adequate funding amount in order to kind of facilitate that to and from travel, or any additional aids that might be needed. Is that helpful? What are the other questions? I've forgotten the rest. I'm sorry.
Right. I suppose what it would be useful to know is that what you would hope is that there's employers out there that will have will be able to support our children sympathetically, because I'm just thinking of my own child going into a setting. He may not be able to fill in the right paperwork, for example. That say he was working in a hospital, he had to sign in or something. The reasonable adjustments, could they be something like that they would put in, that he could bypass that, for example, if there was something that he wasn't able to do? Does that make sense? More perhaps soft than
I think it would be down to, it depends on what the employer needs that information for. I would presume, based on kind of like under equality and kind of, the Disability Act, if there are adjustments needed, i.e. in terms of like, because a young person is visually impaired or hearing impaired, that as a standard they need to accommodate for that. So be it via like modified resources or forms, or having someone there, with an apprenticeship, it's not like the young person will be thrown in the deep end and expected to kind of muddle their way in. They will have someone there, they will have colleagues that they work alongside in order to develop those skills and ask any questions for. So again, it's one of those things that I will so I thought I muted myself, pardon me. So one of those things I would stress is that these conversations are had at the point the young person is applying or has successfully achieved or got onto an apprenticeship, to discuss that with the employer, because if the employer doesn't know, they won't know to put it in place. So obviously, as part of the application, I would presume I would assume that the young person would say, the question is standard there, or even on job applications, to say, do you consider yourself to have any disabilities? Do you need any additional help or support in order to get to come into the workplace? Let them know. And I'd be dumbfounded if they couldn't put things like that into place to support the young people. We do it for people going into work all the time. So I would like to think that, that would be fine. Oh, in terms of real life, I've just remembered, so real life examples. So T levels at the moment, we've the only provider that I'm aware of is kind of the Activate group. So that's Reading College. We're going to have a conversation with our local colleges to see whether there is something they'll be able to do. There is, I think on the link that I've put at the end of the presentation, there is an option for you to go on to, if you click on it, there's like a college finder that you can put your postcode in and see where the nearest provider of T levels are. Apprenticeships, these are national. There is a national website that you can apply for apprenticeships. There are loads. It varies from mechanics, specific mechanics like lorry mechanics, to kind of catering and hospitality. So those ones are really led by the young person, and I would stress that obviously the young person really does need to apply for that. If they say they want to do an apprenticeship, the resources are there. There's a national apprenticeship website. I think I've put the link on at the end for you to have a look at. Some apprenticeships can be linked to colleges. Please go onto the college websites to kind of explore what options they have. BCA have them. I would say all of the major colleges have got apprenticeships. Supported internships. We've got organise my mind. So Reading College have supported internships. So they're part of a program with Ways into Work called Route to Recruit. So it's Reading College and a few specialist settings, and Ways into Work together to put young people into supported internships. So for example, they have I think they've got a contract with the hospital in Reading. I can't remember what it's called. It's like Royal Berkshire Free something or other. I'm really sorry, I don't know. I'm not from the area. So they have a contract with that hospital. They work with Sodexo, which is Johnson & Johnson, and have had really successful placements there. We've had young people go into nurseries. We have had rotations in Manor Green School as well. They've also, I think this year they're doing one linked to kind of a theatre. It's new for this year, that it's like a theatre-based one where the young person will help to put sessions together and then go into primary schools to deliver with providers to go and assist in delivering kind of theatre activities in settings. So there is a hospitality supported internship that is being launched in September 21 in a link to Langley College. So the reason why is because it's linked to the Marriott in Langley. So that will be within the hotel. West London College we have worked with in the past as well. They used to have the supported internship in the Hilton Hotel in Terminal 5. Unfortunately, that has stopped now because the Hilton couldn't commit to the programme, which was really unfortunate for the young people. Now that has changed to a company called Coins in Slough, which I believe is construction software, but the young people kind of build on their communication skills. So they do kind of like typing, talking, and the job coaches are still there to support with kind of applications for work as well, and CV building and interview skills as well. So West London College, in terms of the support they put in place via job coaching, is really, really good. I've worked with them for a number of years. Were there any other questions?
Well, there's quite a few. You can see them when you have a look. I know you're busy talking, but people are, I mean, it's really good to hear local information. And I suppose what would be good to know is what percentage of post-16 EHCP students are taking up the supported internships, apprenticeships and traineeships? And also, are there any like case studies that we could be aware of in terms of how things, you know, experiences? Like, I don't know whether or not that would be something we could look at for the future in terms of maybe doing some videos maybe, or some written case studies, so young people could read, not be so nervous about maybe taking that step into it. Has that ever happened before?
I'm just wondering, Jo, I mean, like you say, lots of questions. At the end of this, are you able to sort of, like, I don't know, download or save those or something and send them over? That'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
I think there's lots there. Yeah.
No, not. And you know, we knew this would be an interesting topic for a lot of people because there are so many options, which is why it's so good to talk about them. When young people are in their last year of secondary, how do they get to learn about what's available? Are you going to talk about that in your next slides, Joanna? I don't want to preempt like what happens when you're in your last year of secondary.
Should we
I was going to say
the rest of the slides, do you think, Joanna?
Yeah, I mean, we don't touch upon it in the next slides, but just to kind of give you an example, the secondary schools, you know, are required to give kind of careers advice to the young people. So they should be discussing the option with the school settings, either with the kind of their form tutors or with a specific careers advisor. And there's obviously information on the local offer that families can access, and as well as kind of going directly to the college websites themselves, just to kind of give you an idea. But in fact, it's actually David's turn next to do some talking. So David, when you're ready for me to change the slide, let me know.
Oh, yeah,
I'm gonna mute myself so you don't hear like drinking my tea or whatever. So just let me know when to flip it over.
Okay, hi everyone. So just a few slides from me. The first one is just about the different types of mainstream college. And maybe this is all really obvious to everybody, but I think, you know, some people do struggle with it. So effectively, you've got three types. So general FE colleges, or GFE colleges are sometimes called. They have quite a kind of broad curriculum, a lot of vocational courses. You know, they may do A-levels as well, but they're really, you know, across the piece all the way down to kind of foundation courses as well. So they're really the kind of broadest offer. And then you have sixth form colleges, which tend to be more focused on A-levels and the like. Often they're a bit smaller and it's like a narrower offer, but quite an academic offer. So, for example, Strode's College is a sixth form college. And then you've got, this gets a bit confusing, you've got school sixth forms, which in practice are pretty similar to sixth form colleges, but they are part of the school. And so obviously on your EHCP, it would still name the school. And depending on the size of the school, that will affect the sort of the range of options they're able to offer. And some of our schools have got sixth forms and some of them don't. So those are sort of broadly the types of college. Joanna, do you want to just hop on to the next one? So yeah, so in FE colleges, quite often what is defined as a full-time course is not actually, you know, 9 till 3:30, 5 days a week. It may be spread across a week, or quite often it's 3 or 4 days of study. Whereas in a school sixth form, and often in a sixth form college, you'd probably be there every day, but not for the whole day. So yeah, probably just using my son as the example. I think went to college every day, but some days he wouldn't be in the afternoon, some days he'd start late, and some days he'd finish early. All depends on the number of courses you're doing and what your timetable looks like. So I think the important takeaway point there is that when people talk about full-time FE provision, they don't necessarily mean 9 till 3, 5 days a week. It's, you know, it could be spread across the week, but it could be quite a lot less than that. And of course, that doesn't mean the rest of the time, as a young person, you can do whatever you like. You're meant to be studying and revising and going over your lessons and so on, which is obviously what all young people do. Next slide, Joanna. Oh, hang on, there's just a question popped up about class sizes. Oh, that's a tough one. I think it really is really dependent. I mean, again, go back a long way to personal experience. If you're doing quite bespoke courses, you know, you could be in a really small class, as in sort of 5, 6, 7 young people. If you're doing a very popular course, could be, you know, 15, 20. I mean, again, I don't think you're talking mainstream school size classes, but it is really dependent on the course you're doing, yeah. So as you probably know, our local FE provider is Berkshire College of Agriculture. And hopefully, as you know, it's not all about agriculture. They do a whole range of courses, but they are very much a general FE college as opposed to a sixth form college. So I'm not sure if they do any A-levels, but it's not really their kind of stock in trade. It's more around the vocational side. And as you all probably know, that's based just outside Maidenhead, sort of out in the countryside. It's all very nice. So that's BCA, and it's often our sort of first port of call, as it were, for looking at courses for young people with additional needs. And because they're the only college that's actually physically located in our borough, it's the one that we have a lot of interaction with about all sorts of things like courses and finances and so on. So that's BCA. So, Joanna. And then we have lots of other colleges around. So the ones people will probably be familiar with is the Windsor Forest College Group, which is Langley College, Windsor College and Stroud's College. Stroud's College is over in Surrey, and that's more of a sixth form college. And Langley and Windsor, not surprisingly, are in Langley and Windsor. But between the three sites, they do a very broad range of courses, and we have lots of conversations with them. So other than BCA, that's probably our next port of call for a lot of young people. And obviously, if you live at the Windsor side of the borough, Langley and Windsor are going to be closer to your home address, quite possibly. And then there's a company called Activate, which runs loads of colleges, but relevant to us, mainly Reading College and Bracknell and Woking colleges. And sorry, Joanne, I'm going to throw a question at you here. Are those the colleges that often have our sort of ASD type provision? Is that?
Yeah, so just to kind of chime in, Reading and Bracknell and Woking colleges have got ASD centres linked to the colleges. The kind of the level of support that they provide ranges from kind of ASD centre all the time, and kind of as part of maybe like a reintegration programme, and kind of working towards kind of dipping into kind of mainstream lessons so the young person can get a feel for the college, or it will be accessing say, for example, a level 1 course with some additional support. It's the college that determines the level of support that is needed for the young person. Yeah, so, and then attached to Reading College, there is also a provision called Our House provision, which is predominantly sort of kind of profound and multiple learning difficulties, I would say, as well. So we have some students there, and then Henley College also have a provision called Pathways, which is along the same lines. When the young person's needs are quite high, they can potentially attend there to kind of continue developing numeracy, literacy, and other kind of life skills, if you will.
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, that's right. So Henley, which is obviously just over the border in Oxfordshire, I mean, as a college, they run a whole load of courses, but quite specifically, as Joanna says, there's this course that often young people from sort of Manor Green and so on will often move on to, and that's a course that they find, you know, quite successful. So that's often where we're working with Henley. But as you can imagine, the whole list of colleges, and depending about where you live in the borough and what your neighbouring authorities are, there's lots of colleges young people can consider, and often they have to obviously take into account things like how easy it is for them to get there and so forth. So, and as you can see, there's a big list on the local offer. What's the next slide, Joanne?
I think it's back to me now, David. Oh no, no, it's not. It's application
No, I
process.
thought I was
It's still
off
you.
there. Yeah, so sort of thing to remember with colleges is, as with any young person with an EHCP, you know, we need to consult with them and confirm that they can meet the young person's needs with reasonable adjustments and so forth. But also, the young person needs to be applying for a course there, because it's not like in school where you're just generically applying for a place at school. It's very much about what courses that you want to do, and you know, whether a young person is able to access that course really is going to depend on the nature of the course. For example, at BCA, there's some agricultural courses where the young people are out and about over quite a big area of the, you know, the countryside doing things, which is great, but that might, you know, pose a challenge for some young people because of their needs. Again, if it's very much kind of mechanics course, or it's a hairdressing course, whatever, you know, these could all have an impact. But obviously what our role is to try and facilitate that and make sure the college can make the reasonable adjustments. But anyway, very important that the young person applies for the course that they want to do. Again, if you're in a school that has a sixth form, you know, there'll be internal processes for that, but you probably have to apply for that. And even if you are offered a place, it's most likely to be very conditional on your GCSE grades. And we just mentioned at the bottom, we talked about transport a little bit, but absolutely no guarantee that will continue, and the young person would need to reapply and to see if they're eligible. Okay, so that's that. What's the next slide, Joanna? Oh yes, so annual reviews. So really from year 9 onwards, we should be very much focusing on preparing for adulthood, and some of you have probably been involved with some of the work we're doing in the local authority at the moment about developing our PFA processes. And the outcomes very much in annual reviews should be focused on what the young person wants to do going forward. But obviously that's quite a tough question for teenagers, but you know, we really need to be focusing on that as, you know, the tool that allows us to plan forward in terms of college courses or whatever might happen after that, and clearly a focus on independence as well. And the PFA outcomes, we'll try and integrate those into the, you know, the main areas in the EHCP, you know, such as communication, interaction, cognition and learning, and so forth. So hopefully young people, you know, year 9 upwards should, you know, you should be able to see their PFA outcomes woven into their EHCP. So is there anything to add to that, Joe? I'm just thinking about a few questions come up, so I'm just having a quick look at that.
If you want to have a look, I was going to say these are the PFA outcomes specifically. So it's around employment, independent living, community inclusion, and health. Obviously, there is an understanding that it should be kind of in kind of collaboration with other services, if appropriate. So, for example, around independent living, obviously, the SEND as special educational needs can't secure living arrangements, but you know, we can certainly signpost to relevant services that you could access in order to have the assessments made, or to kind of go on to waiting lists, and so on and so forth. So what we like to do is, obviously the young people will, hopefully young people will have aspirations that, like David said, it might not be apparent from year 9. It might just be very, very broad, say like, I want a job, I want a house, sort of thing. So we'd start thinking about what can education do in order to support that. So have a job, right? Okay, do you have any, you know, like, does the young person have any idea of what field they want to go into? Yes or no? That would help to tailor some of the outcomes. It's about, if they say, okay, they want a house, okay, what do they need in order to do that? Okay, so they need to develop their numeracy skills, you know, developing their skills in order to manage money, use money, and kind of save, things like that. And so we're kind of hoping to move going forward around, we're kind of trying to employ kind of holistic outcomes within any HCP, but that's not to say that so for example, just an example that comes to mind is, say for example, you know, Johnny will be able to go to the shop once a week, and make a purchase and get the correct change. So obviously that isn't something that the school can monitor directly, in the sense, or a college can monitor, but it's part of PFA because it's developing independent living skills. So how would the college support that? Well, they would give Johnny numeracy skills. They'd be talking about social skills, how to interact within, you know, part of the course, you know, you know, the interaction would be part of that. Part of the college course would be to kind of develop those transferable skills that can then be used in the community, in life, in real life. So that's I think on the previous slide it said, if I flip back, so its outcomes should be personalised and focused on the young person's aspirations, supporting as independent life as possible, and creating like outcomes that develop transferable real life skills.
Joanna, can I just say, there are comments saying that people aren't finding that their school are doing this at year 9, and it's just a normal annual review, and PFA outcomes aren't being brought into the annual review.
Mm-hmm.
What can a parent do to challenge that? But also, what training can be given to schools, and is there? Because I do believe there is some training taking place at the moment.
So yeah, that's interesting, because I mean, just on that point, I did a little survey of our secondary Senkos recently, and the responses are still coming back. But you know, certainly the response I was getting, that everybody seemed conscious that the year 9 review should be focused on PFA. I mean, in terms of their expertise and some knowledge to do that, I think not unexpectedly there was some variation, and I think we'll use that to focus our training. But certainly, I think I'd be surprised if our mainstream secondaries and say Manor Green were not focusing on PFA in year 9. And if that was the case, I certainly want to hear about it. I mean, there's schools, you know, there's a broader range of schools where young people are placed where, you know, in a sense, I can't, you know, provide that assurance. But I mean, I think in the first instance, if parents feel able to raise that with a school, then please do. But otherwise, absolutely come back to us, because you know, our expectation on schools is really clear. We'd be more than happy to go back to the Senko or the sort of head of inclusion and flag that up. But in terms of training and so on, I mean, once I've got all these responses back, I think we're going to use that to kind of tailor some training to make sure that they're inviting the right people and that they feel happy, you know, having those conversations around aspirations, and, you know, then developing PFA outcomes that match that. So I think it is a bit of a work in progress, but I'm a little bit disappointed to hear that some schools aren't sort of leading on that. So just one other question there. I mean, any young person who's got an EHCP, then obviously as we get up to sort of year 11, we know we should be having those conversations with the family about, okay, what next? And then consulting with schools and so forth. So you shouldn't be, you know, if you've got an EHCP, then you're in the system, and that should work through. So I don't think it's dependent on families to kind of put their hand up and sort of remind us, but that should be happening as a matter of course. More messages coming up. Just scroll down a little bit.
Does anyone from your team, Joanna, it might just be you, attend any of the year 9 annual reviews? Does an assessment coordinator attend any of those annual reviews?
Do you want me to answer that, Joanna? Because so with the year 9 ones, that would still be the pre-16 team. And I suppose the answer would be we wouldn't attend as a matter of course, but as with any, you know, because we'd expect the school to be able to run that review and invite the right people. However, I suppose as with any annual review, if there was concern from the family or from the school that actually there were issues that really need our input, then of course, you know, by all means invite us. But I mean, I think we are probably quite dependent on the school to be, you know, managing that process.
And someone's made a comment about the fact that the template doesn't make it clear where the PF outcome should sit. So that could be a comment, you know, something that you think about.
Yeah, so so what we tend to do, like in the previous slide, we tend to add it underneath. So depending on the outcome, it might still be integrated within the four sections already in there. So communication and interaction, cognition and learning, social, emotional, mental health, and sensory and physical. And then what my team tends to do if we get a plan, if we have a plan in post 16 that doesn't have PFA outcomes, we will add a preparing for adulthood box underneath that and add in relevant outcomes. It might mean moving it, or it might be working with the setting in order to create some new ones for focus for preparing for adulthood.
So just to Ramos has been asking about who contacts, where does the contact first get made about starting this route to, you know, PFA? And it's the school, I believe. Is that right? So Ramos, you should be speaking to your school to start this process, and then the school will contact Joanna. Is that right? Am I right in that?
Well, it'd probably be the
yeah,
assessment
it
coordinator.
depends. Yeah, it would be the assessment coordinator up until the end of year 11. So my team takes over, just for clarity for everyone here, my team takes over from year 12 upwards.
And roughly, and we're not asking you for exact data, but how many young people go to an FE college and how many go into the other routes to employment that you talked about in the beginning session?
Well, I'd need to check that. I'd need to go through. I can't give you the exact figure. I would say broadly the majority of our young people do go into college, but that's not to say an FE college I'm talking about. But that's not to say that they then, because the colleges usually have a supported internship or apprenticeship linked, it might very well be that they do a course there, and then the college kind of, through advice from the college staff, direct them potentially onto one of those routes when they feel and the young person feels ready to access that route. So the figures predominantly right now, looking at it, like for this academic year, it's going to be, I would estimate probably around 80% maybe in some form of FE college, but that's not to say that they can't access the other routes. Does that make sense? But I'd have to, if it's beneficial for everyone to have the specific figures, I can certainly work out the statistics in terms of our current cohort, where they are.
Yeah, and it would be good to know how many people find employment. I mean, I know you said 66% as a average nationally, but it would be quite nice to know. It would be nice to hear some good news stories about young people gaining employment. Give us some hope and aspirations for our young people. But also it would be good to know that, because when you were talking about supported internships, the fact would worry me that you suggested that they might only last 6 months.
Okay.
That would
so that's what the kind of the government guidance says, but like just to kind of go back, because the majority of our SIs are linked to colleges, they are spaced over the academic year. There's only one independent provider that I would think I'd need to just double check with, but my feeling is that they also run over the course of an academic year. So I can't think of any examples where we have any 6-month ones. It's like 6 months worth of work, say, spread out over the course of the year.
Yeah, and there was someone on here that asked about, in particularly about the course you mentioned that's linked to the Marriott Langley College. I believe that's what you said. So I'm sure the link would be on here, but would the parent need to get in touch with Langley College? Is that how it would work, Joanna?
To apply for a supported internship there? So we would need to send a consultation for it. So because it's Langley College, it's a Slough based, it's from kind of our neighbouring authority. For the last that I was informed, there were still spaces on it. So what we would need, what the parent or the young person would need to do in that instance is let their assessment coordinator know that they want to consult for that placement. And then we would send a consultation over. And at the same time, if they then, as David kind of mentioned, do the application process as well. So we're covered from both ends.
Great, thank you.
I'm just quite conscious of time, Jo, actually.
Yeah, no, I know, we're very near to time. Please feel free, anyone who's got any burning questions, to type them in. If I haven't asked it, then I apologise. There's been quite a few questions here today, and I will go through them all and make sure that we've answered. I think transport is a concern for some people, knowing that there won't be transport provided, and a lot of these aren't local supported internships and apprenticeships, and it's how their young people will get there, because a lot of them don't have the skills to get there by themselves.
Okay.
And I just had a quick question I wanted to ask you. Early on in the talk, you talked about university, and I know the plans cease at university. I was just wondering whether or not, if you've got a child that maybe wants to give university a go because they think they can do it, but they're concerned that they might not be able to do it. We all know that happens. would you ever consider holding the plan open for a short period of time so that they could give it a go, and then if it didn't work out, they could fall back into something, you know, like a sport internship and apprenticeship? Is that ever had that?
That's a bit of a tough question.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not usually the kind of, you know, just in case. I suppose there's quite a lot of unpicking there, because I mean, if you were, you know, if you've got the qualifications to go to university, you know, I'm just generalizing terribly here, but say you know, you've got some A levels or something. I guess if it turned out maybe university wasn't the right place for you, to keep your EHCP, it has to be about educational progression. And I suppose I'm thinking a little bit about, okay, well, what is it that you might be doing instead that would represent a progression on from sort of doing A levels? And I'm not sure I've necessarily got the answer to that. And so that's a hard one to answer. I mean, I suppose broadly, you know, we don't really keep the ACPs open just in case. And I guess there are young people, you know, without SEN who drop out of university because ultimately, for whatever reason, I don't feel. But then I guess the next step then would be looking at kind of getting a job or something, because if you've kind of got that set of qualifications, you're probably already well placed. So I'm not sure, you know, that's necessarily the kind of the SI cohort. But Joanna, do you sort of, I don't know, I'm not sure that's
well, yeah, it's difficult, because I would say I haven't had any instances where we have done that. Like David said, if you're able to access university, the kind of the understanding is that then if it doesn't work out, you could potentially go down one of the routes, an apprenticeship. You don't need to have an EHCP for, because it is written into the apprenticeship sort of kind of guidelines that reasonable adjustments need to be made for a young person if they have a disability or an additional need. That, you know, there are sort of, you know, I'm not, again, sweeping generalization, there are young people in the system who have additional needs that don't have an EHCP that will absolutely still be eligible to apply for an apprenticeship, for example, or work, and make their employer aware of their needs in order for support to be put in place for them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm sorry we've had so many questions here. Was that the end of the presentation, Joanna? I'm sorry if it was.
No, it was. It's just useful links and questions. So we've kind of, yeah, so it was the end. So so the links there, so these are just some of the things, but if you Google a lot of it, you'll be able to find some links, and then there's, if you look at our local offer as well, there's some links to some other additional sites that might be able to help young people. There are sites available. In fact, I might add something on here. There's one that has like kind of links to videos of people in the industry, so the young people can potentially watch those videos. I'll make sure to add that on here before I send this presentation to you, Joe, so the families can access that. So I'll make a note to do that, and I'll resend it to you, and with some other kind of useful links that I've found, and kind of we share with the families, and when they're kind of a little bit undecided or want to have some real life view from the from the workplace itself, because there are some sites available. So I'll add them on here.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you both for your time this morning. I appreciate it.